Just a couple more things, and one thing I've been thinking about is uh, creativity. There is the aha moment, but like, what processes do you think you have to go through to think of an idea, but then also there's the idea, but then there's, as you know, the execution, right? Making it happen.
Right. I think there are mind games you can do. And one of them is postulate a component and say, what if this component were free? What would that allow to be done? So maybe you think digital memory. If digital memory were free, what could you do with it? And maybe that would, at some point in time, that would say, well, maybe I can put a whole bunch of songs on a little drive, i.e., the iPod.
Right. Right.
You know, another thing you can do is try mashing things together. So, what would I get if I mashed together a box of cornflakes and a bicycle? Now, that's maybe an extreme. One of the games I have that I'm working on right now is, what if you were to have miniature golf, pool tables, and a pinball? What if they had a baby? What would it be?
Right. It's like
So,
it's like a bumper pool with golf clubs.
well, no, but bumper pool, play it with a pool cue, but then trick it out with the lights and the sounds of a pinball,
Oh, right.
but you're
Right.
still trying to get a hole in one. Weird, weird, weird pool shapes, pool table shapes. And
So
I've done
yeah,
just so
that's kind of like
that's
there was a book called Thinker Toys, I think, that kind of had some
yes,
mind games.
yeah. Well, I think that mashing things together that are disparate often yields funny things. Like uh, I can't think of an example right now, but
Well, there's also if you're aware of some things that are on the horizon, like you think of quantum computing, or what is it, cold fusion, and
right,
how maybe energy. Okay, so energy will be free. Well, people are working on that, right? It'll be easy to make
right,
energy, and so if you can tie it to something that's really coming down the pike, play those sort of mind games. You might be able to tie it to
yeah,
something that's really around the corner too. So it's interesting. Um, and then there's execution, which is just a whole other thing, because there's the idea, but then there's the making it happen part. And I guess that just goes back to maybe grit. And but you have to plan and think through some things, or
Well, I actually have a new process that I actually kind of recommend. Um, I realize that my successes have been right time, right place, right people. My failures have been wrong time, wrong people, wrong tech. Um, so if you only have one idea, there's only one time, and that's now. So what I do now is if I get an idea for a business, I short form a business plan, do a little projection of what the market size might be and what the cost and that sort of thing. But then I put it on the shelf. I call it my marinade. I let it marinate for a while. And I've got about 6 or 7 of them right now. And then all of a sudden, something will happen. The right person will come across you, and you say, that person would be a great CEO of Business Plan 3.
hmm,
And so now you have a better chance, and the tech is there. Like I kindled one up right after because it was because it basically was a echo of a company I had before that was in the education space. But COVID really galvanized a lot of parents because they didn't like what their kids were learning in school and how insipid a lot of it was. And so all of a sudden their ability and willingness to spend on ancillary educational systems is there. And so I spun that up, and now I've got a good team working on it, and we've got a good thing. It's called Exodexa, and I think it's going to go public this fall.
Interesting. Is that
Right
so?
time, right place.
Is that like a fusion too of entertaining education or something like that? Is that
Yeah, it's gamified education. It's a little bit
gamified
like it's a echo of Brain Rush, which I did 7 years ago.
And I think I saw that you have a book coming out along those lines,
Yes.
right? In October
Yeah,
or something?
it's called Creating the Future of Education.
Oh, okay. And that's related to this Exodexa venture?
Right.
Oh, very cool.
That reminds me, I'm going to send you my science fiction PDF too. I forgot that.
Thank you. Yeah. I did one. I'd be embarrassed to send it to you. It's a very short story. Actually, I I put it on Kindle like I for free, I think. But I'll send it to you, and as long as you promise not to make fun of me.
I would never do that. Did you make any money on Kindle?
Not a dime. Not a dime. We'll exchange them, and I'm sure yours will be more interesting. But
Maybe not. Well, I wrote it, and there was a suggestion. If you're doing romance novels, you do certain things, and if you're selling to young males, science fiction is primarily a young male thing. You have to have a certain amount of steamy sex in it, but it has to be one where the girl is the aggressor.
okay.
Like the guys, their fantasy is that they can just sit there and be a nerd and have a girl throw themselves at her. At him. So I have a little of that in there.
Okay. Well, I was going to
And
share it with my son, but I think I'll just read it myself.
well, my wife, who's my line editor, my copy editor, she read it and she said, "Do you really need to do that,
Oh, yeah. Well, mine has might not be nearly as exciting. So, but I thought about this too. You're the father of personal gaming, the way I look at things, right? You brought gaming into the home, and gaming is huge. It's a gigantic industry, and it wasn't when you were doing that. And you've led an interesting life. You've met some characters, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Who was the one guy who told me about? McAfee.
Oh yeah.
And of course,
I was on his board for a while. He is an interesting. He was an interesting character.
Yeah. You gave Steve Jobs his first job, I think, his first real job,
right?
And I mean, and everybody, right? So there's got to be a movie or a biography in the making here.
There is, but they've been working on it for 8 years now, and I guess the wheels of Hollywood run much shorter. Well, one of the problems, there were 2 Steve Jobs movies that didn't do well, and that kind of put a kibosh on biopics of tech people. Though right. I think my life is much. I think video games are much more interesting than just the start of the personal computer.
Yeah, games are. This would be a huge movie. I mean, games are where it's at. I mean,
yeah, they're still working on it. So maybe one of these days.
Well, I guess just a couple last questions here. Thank you for indulging me in this long format. of interview.
Hey, I've had fun.
I'm enjoying. I mean, I could go on, and maybe next time when you're in Charlottesville, Virginia,
Yeah.
as long as Jerry Seinfeld doesn't mind, we'll do that thing. And this is your idea: um, riding in cars with tech geeks with coffee, right? But driverless cars, right? So instead of
Cool.
comedians in cars with coffee, tech people in cars, in driverless cars with coffee. So
That's a great idea, Paul.
I think it
That's
was your
really smart.
idea. I think
Was it?
well, maybe it was a combination. It might have been a mashup. I don't know, but
I think it was a mashup
I may have
because
threw the coffee in there.
definitely I would be more driven towards alcohol
Right. Well, hey, we could have a bar and you could just pick what you want.
because
We
if it's
won't be driving.
driverless,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. See,
absolutely.
that's one of the big benefits.
That
You
is.
know?
That is. Are
I
there?
mean, self-driving cars is going to be a boon to the bar industry.
Yes,
That's one of the big winners, you know.
it is. It is. It's going to be a boon for safety. I think
Yeah.
drunk driving is, I don't know, might be 50% of all accidents or something. It's high. It's up
Yeah,
there.
I think so. Yeah.
It's up there. Driving under the
And now
influence.
you have pot too. And people say that pot isn't as bad, but I don't know. When I've gotten stoned, I wouldn't drive.
Anything that makes you sleepy or whatever. I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
It can't be good for driving. It's when the bad things happen. It happens so quickly. You have to have good reaction time.
Yep.
Um, so when people look back at what you've done, what do you think? What are you hoping that people remember the most? I guess this is like the reflective part of the
I
corny
don't know.
reflective part of a podcast, right?
My kids asked me the other day, what do I want on my tombstone? And I said, that's macabre. And the one that I came up with is he lived an interesting life.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and then the other one was if you could sit down and have a conversation with your younger self, what would your advice be to the 25-year-old Nolan Bushnell?
Fire the assholes faster.
It's good. Are there's mostly John? If you're listening, this does not apply to you, but is it mostly the COOs?
No, it comes from all things. I mean, I can think of several times that if I had fired the head of marketing when I knew that he was a dumb shit, um, and I mean, I can think of probably 12 guys and 2 women that if I had fired even 2 months sooner than I did, the company would have been better off.
It's hiring is hard, as you know. You're finding the next Steve Jobs. I think you cover a lot of ground there, but firing people can be very hard, especially if you have somewhat of a heart, right?
Yeah, I had one vice president that actually enjoyed firing people. So those of us with less spunk, we would just transfer them into his department and let him fire them.
Well, that sounds like a critical, yeah, that a critical
I
hire
actually,
is
I,
that.
I think that betrayed a serious personal weakness myself. And I'm not proud of that.
Well, I guess last one, as we look into the next decade, I don't know, 10 years, what emerging tech or trends do you think are going to just change the way we live, work, play, interact on a daily basis? Like what are the could be the top one, top three?
I actually think GPT is going to be in the next 10 years massive. And I think autonomy is going to be massive. I think it's 1 and 2 or 2 and 1.
Yeah.
Um, because I think this probably is the decade where autonomy gets to a useful point that it becomes ubiquitous, and I think that there will be some further deterioration of costs, or I think things will get cheaper and more efficient and better. And we're very close now, and I think that with a little nudge we'll get there. And then I think that we'll have explosive growth in the autonomy space.
Nolan, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to do this. It's just been wonderful. And
It's fun.
this was fun. Yeah, this is great. And
Well, Paul, I got to tell you, you're a brain that I respect. And so it's fun to, I've always felt that it's more fun to be in a room with smart people than it is be in a room with dumb people.
well, with that, thank you.
Oh, unless you're playing poker with them.
Right. Well, there you go.
Okay, well, the old story that if you sit down at a poker table and you can't figure out who the sucker is, you should leave.
Right.
It's probably you. Okay.
100%.
Be good, Paul.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Bye now.
I hope you enjoyed the show Driven with me, Paul Perrone, your host. Don't forget to check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. Thank you for listening in. See you soon.